Coming up on the program today, we're planting tomatoes, talking about how to get your potatoes in the ground.
And we'll talk with Shawn of Body, Mind, and Soil, all about healthy water, all that and more.
The Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Podcast is permeating into your ears with your host, Joey Bear.
And it could be the weeds. Some gardeners try to get all the weeds out of their garden. Other gardeners leave them in their garden. It's really a decision that you need to make. There's benefits to both sides of that. It's just something that you need to figure out what you want to do for your garden.
And Holly Bear.
Canning is a science. When you're canning, you want to make sure you follow the directions, follow the recipe, don't cut corners, don't replace things. It's crucial to you, your health, and your family.
They're professional gardeners with full-time jobs, and they're on the air now.
Greetings, fellow gardeners. Welcome to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Podcast. Homesteaders, preppers, organic gardeners, urban gardeners, and everyone in between, we welcome you to the program. This is the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Podcast for the health-conscious organic gardener worldwide. I am your host, Joey Baird. Beside me is my wife, best friend, and gardening partner,
Holly Baird.
Behind the TWVG microphone here at the WI Garden Media Studios. Here in southeast Wisconsin, the information that you're going to hear is important and viable to the life of your garden. You just may have to tweak some of the dates and times that you applied for. If you're tuning in, you're wanting to learn how to be a better gardener. You may already know who we are, but if you don't, we'll briefly go over who we are and what we do, and then we'll talk about how we can get the best tomatoes to grow in our garden that we've ever had before.
We are a husband-wife duo that we create videos for you about gardening, canning, what to do with the food you grow, simple home living, and even reusing items. And these are high-quality, high-definition videos, and they are a couple times a week that we go ahead and put those videos out. We also produce a quarterly digital magazine, which is free on our website, and that's got some great colorful information for you. And then alongside that, we have this podcast.
You can find all of that information at the website, the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com. About 5 videos right now weekly, the digital magazine, all of that, and a whole lot more happening there at the website. Well, let's talk about tomatoes. 90% of those who garden grow tomatoes in some form or fashion: containers, raised beds, traditional ground garden. We're going to cover some of the basics on what you should know before and during the planting and the early stages of growing tomatoes, and then later on in the season we'll talk more in depth about potential harvesting early and all that important stuff. A lot of the information we're going to cover, in addition to extra information, can be found on our website under the digital magazine tab. We created, published a digital magazine strictly for growing tomatoes. So that is free for downloadable. You can read it online. You can print it out, whatever you want to do. So first of all, let's talk about how many different varieties there are available in the world. There is roughly between 4,000 and 7,500 different varieties of tomatoes in the world. Not all of these are commercially available, but it just shows you the magnitude of potential different tomatoes that there are.
So, keeping that in mind, you might want to figure out what kind of tomatoes you want to plant or grow, and it really depends on what you're doing with those tomatoes. There's varieties that are good for making sauces like pasta sauce or salsas, and those are typically the paste varieties. Say you just want a nice slicing tomato, or you like pretty tomatoes, there's heirloom varieties, there's plenty of hybrid varieties, so think about that. If you're unsure, you can always just look at different seed catalogs, and it usually describes the description of what it tastes like pretty well. And
if you have a favorite color that you want to grow in the garden, there are all colors of the rainbow of tomatoes. They're not red. They're not just red. They're every color imaginable. So first, you want to start your tomato seedlings, or start them from seed. If you do start them from seed, 6 to 8 weeks before your average last frost date. You can find your average last frost date under your go to your favorite search engine, type in average last frost date, and insert your zip code. This will give you a average of the last 10 recorded years in your particular area. If you are if you're within that 6 to 8 week window, and it's getting closer to that last average frost date, and it may be too late for you to start tomatoes indoors from seed. Now, that's not necessarily true, but Holly, you grew up where you just actually took the tomato seed and planted it in the ground, and you didn't start with little starts that you bought from the garden center or you planted in the house.
No, we started with, what we did is Memorial Day weekend, we just put our seeds in the ground, tomato seeds and then a few other vegetables, and that's what happened. And then they came up as they came up.
Now, by getting the starts or the transplants, you're going to greatly speed up the time to maturity that these plants will bear the fruit. Let's talk about the different varieties or the different categories that tomatoes fall in, and this also will determine the type of area that you are growing them in. We're talking indeterminate, determinate, and semi-determinate varieties of tomatoes, and we're going to discuss what each one of these mean, and they're pretty simple to understand.
Right, so indeterminate is also known as the vine tomato, and this is a variety that continues to grow, and it will put on fruit. It'll keep growing until a frost. So this variety could possibly grow in the right climate continuously if there's no frost. Then we have determinate, which is also known as the bush variety. It's going to grow, it's going to put on a lot of tomatoes, and then it's going to be done. And that's the bush tomato. And then
that's the determinate.
Determinate. And the semi-determinate will put on a grouping of tomatoes. It'll grow a little bit more, we'll put on a few more tomatoes, but it has a first initial harvest and then a little bit after that.
So if you're in an area where you have a lot of space and you want a continuous amount of tomatoes, the indeterminate might be the choice for you. If you're in an area where space is limited, a determinate variety where it grows to a certain height and bears its fruit and that's it may be the choice for you. Or you want something in between that's a semi-determinate. Now, the determinate varieties fall in another category. There's early determinate, late, mid-determinate, and late determinate. That just based on when the tomato bears its fruit. If you're in an area where timing is of the essence, you could plant a determinate variety of tomatoes, an early determinate variety. It bears its fruit. You can rip that tomato plant out after that fruit is already ready and harvested, and then plant something else in that spot. You don't want to plant tomatoes in the same spot multiple years because of diseases and insect issues. Now, tomatoes require full sun. You can find information online where you can plant them in partial sun, and they'll do so. Adequate sun, 8 hours plus, is the best answer for your tomatoes. Now, at the time of planting, there's some techniques to help increase the levels of yield or the amount of tomatoes that you can get off your tomato plants. We have found two different methods to be relatively successful. One is, well, first let's talk about preparation of the soil 2 to 4 weeks before you even decide to dig a hole and plant the tomatoes.
So what you want to do to prep the soil is figure out where you're going to plant your tomatoes, and then in each spot where a tomato will go, which you should kind of decide ahead of time so you know how many tomato plants you may want, or have
2 to 3 feet is the spacing on each tomato based on your.
So then you take a handful of Epsom salt and you just put it. You don't have to dig a hole. You just put it right over where you're going to plant your tomato. This will then, throughout the time, will soak up into the soil and it'll be beneficial to your tomatoes. It helps prevent the blossom end rot, which is a disease. It's a physiological problem. Disease is a physiological problem, and that's when you get the blossom end of tomato, not the side attached to the stem, but the other side looks rotted. And essentially, it's a lack of calcium. So what Epsom salts do, which is also known as magnesium sulfate, they help the plant pick up the right amount of nutrients.
That's available in the soil. Now, some people will say, I don't want to add Epsom salt to my garden for whatever the reason is. Well, then you can go with bone meal. Bone meal is calcium. Bones are calcium. Bone meal is the dried and steamed and then powderized bones of animals. There's organic means of this. You can put the recommended applicational rate in the hole at the time of planting, and then that will also help the plant pick up the necessary calcium that it desires to prevent that blossom rot on the bottom of the tomatoes. And then you can also incorporate with that calcium, that bone meal, a handful of rock phosphate. Now, some people may decide not to do the rock phosphate because of the environmental damage that it does. Rock phosphate, different results have shown that it can help double the production of the tomatoes on your particular tomato plant. We have seen some relatively decent results in proving this, but also rock phosphate, based on the year, can be quite expensive. So what we may just completely go against buying the rock phosphate this year, using the bone meal, and seeing how the tomatoes react to that. We know they're going to do good. We're adding the calcium that the plants need, in addition to good, rich, organic compost to the hole when planting. You can plant the tomato extremely deep because it's a nightshade family. It will put roots on the stem anywhere where the stem touches the soil. So we're covering a lot here. We're kind of bouncing a little bit here and there, but we want to kind of give you some information before you get into the tomato patch so you kind of know what's going on. Let's also talk briefly about support. Tomatoes need to be supported. By getting the tomatoes up off the ground, you're going to instantly double the production by 2 times the amount of tomatoes that you have on your plants. There are some different methods to using to support those tomatoes in the garden.
Right, so what you want to do is you want to think about what your options are. Some people will choose to get tomato cages, and those are found at the local garden center. They're usually $1 each or a couple bucks each.
These are the real cheap ones now.
Right.
You can get very elaborate tomato cages that are very, very expensive but last a lifetime. But we found, the for the most part, the tomato cages, you put a stake in there and they'll do relatively decent for what you're looking or what you're needing the purpose for.
Right. So then you could also do something like where you take some sticks or small pieces of wood, and you can tie rags or any sort of fabric that you may not want to help support your tomato. You tie it around there, help stake it up a little bit. And then there's also the Florida weave.
Florida weave is the method of using strings stretched across the growing bed and allowing the tomato, with a little assistance from you, to weave up through the strings. So essentially, a mental image would be, what the side of a wrestling ring or a boxing ring has those ropes. Essentially, you're mimicking that type of structure, 6 inches, a foot, 18 inches, 24, etc., on up, however high you want to make it. And then as the tomato plant grows, you can gently weave it from one side up through the other side, and the strings will react or use as what a cage would do to support that tomato up off the ground. And you can also clip it to the string or gently tie it to the string to kind of help for more stabilization. We've done that last year. We're doing it more this year. We have seen some good results, and that eliminates the whole necessity of buying tomato cages if you have a large amount of tomatoes or a very small amount of tomatoes to support. A lot of the big greenhouses, this is what they use. They use a Florida weave type of support. So this is just some of the information. Again, go to the website, thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com. The digital magazine on tomatoes covers a vast variety of everything you need to know, from beginning to planting to harvesting and everything in between, to help you be better at growing tomatoes. We'll include a link to that digital magazine in the show notes, as well as you can just go to the website and check it out. We'll be back right after this. If you could double the life of your raised bed boxes by sealing the wood with a non-toxic wood preservative, would you? Well, now you can, with a clear, penetrating product called Internal Wood Stabilizer. It's 100% non-toxic and easy to apply. Seal your bare, untreated wood surfaces, even chicken coops, by spraying Internal Wood Stabilizer. It's invisible, seals the wood from the inside out, and never wears off. Recommended by organic gardening experts. Internal Wood Stabilizer. Check it out at timberprocoatings.com. embrace.com.
Do you want your next raised beds to be easy, functional, and beautiful? The Embrace helps you create the garden you've always wanted. Finally, raised beds that everyone can assemble and enjoy. No tools needed. Just slide any lumber into the Embrace corner, fill with your favorite soil mix, and you're ready to plant. Made from 100% recycled steel right here in the USA. And a portion of every sale helps to build school and community gardens all across the country. Let the Embrace help you create your next raised bed. Grow beautifully with the Embrace. Available at local garden centers and online at artofthegarden.net.
Hello, everybody. I'm Farmer Lovejoy, host of The Dirty Cultivator, a podcast show where farmers can be heard promoting the consumption and importance of more locally grown food.
And I'm Carrie Kay. Don't forget to listen to our Northwest perspective at The Dirty Cultivator.
And now, let's get to the garden with Joey and Holly Baird on the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Podcast.
Organic Gardening World, the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com for the health-conscious organic gardener worldwide is the destination for all things gardening. I'm Joey Baird. Holly Baird's right here beside me, rocking the Organic Gardening World.
For more information on our sponsors, you can go to our website at the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com. Click on the podcast tab and you'll have your information there. Support them because they support us.
Let's talk about growing potatoes. Potatoes are a cool weather crop, not related to the sweet potato that some of you grow during the summer months. Regular ground potatoes are ones you need to get in the ground relatively early in the spring.
So when you get your potatoes and you're ready to have them, you got them and you're ready, you want to prep the soil first. And what you want is a good amount of compost in your soil, and you want to make sure it's nutrient rich and nice and loose.
Now, if you have access to manure, composted manure, that would be the key to incorporate into the bottom of the potato trenches. Now, we get our seed potatoes, and that's what you want to start with. Now, you can just get the potatoes that may be sprouting your cupboard from your local grocery store. You can use those. We've done it. It works. But we focus on good organic seed potatoes, and we get those from woodprairiefarms.com. They're a specialty potato farm in Maine. Now, at this point of the year, they probably are sold out on most of their varieties, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a lot of information. They focus on seed potatoes, and there is a lot of information on their website at woodprairiefarms.com, whether you buy potatoes from them or not. It's a lot of great information. So let's getting these potatoes ready to go in the ground.
All right, so seed potatoes are ready to go to the ground, but what you can do is something called chitting. And you go ahead and what you do is you cut the potato up so there's an eye on each chunk. Then you let them sit for, I don't know, what, a day?
2 to 3 days.
2 to 3 days. And then they're going to get the scab part on them. And that part's on the flesh of the potato, not the skin. It's just going to get kind of nice and crusty over the skin. And that's good. You want that for your garden. So you want to let them get chitted before you go ahead and plant them.
Yeah, that's required. Now, you don't have to do that, but it is kind of recommended. And that scabbing over just helps prevent a lot of possible insects or bugs from chewing into the potato and eating them before they even sprout. When cutting the potatoes, like Holly said, you want to have them no smaller than a chicken egg. That's the minimum size. If your potato is the size of a chicken egg, you plant the whole potato. But if you can cut them and divide them up to where you have at least one eye, possibly two per chunk, that's going to extend your seed potatoes to allow more of them to grow. You can get more seed potatoes out of them by dividing them up.
Right. So that's what you want to do there. Then planting. Okay. So you don't want to plant them too early in cold, wet soil. You want to make sure that it's about 50 degrees. 45 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, no colder than that. The potatoes will set and rot in the ground if you plant them far too early. They'll rot in the ground, then you've got no potatoes. Minimum of 45 to 50 degrees, consistent soil temperature. And when I'm talking about consistent soil temperature, I'm talking 4 or 6 inches in the ground. Obviously, if it's been warm all week, the top soil temperature will be much, much warmer than 4 to 6 inches below the ground. So you want to be sure you get that soil temperature right.
You want to plant them about 1 to 3 inches deep with the eyes up. So you go ahead, look at your potato, put the eyes up, plant them 1 to 3 inches deep. It takes 3 to 4 weeks for it to sprout.
Now, we're talking 2 to 3 inches deep, then you can hill it up. Or what we do is we do the trench method. And there's different ways of planting. You can plant them in straw, do a lasagna planting. We take and figure out where we're going to plant our potatoes and then dig a trench about 6 inches deep and plant them. And then as the potato grows, and we keep adding more soil to it. So there's many different techniques that are successful at growing potatoes. You can do this also in a container as well. Recommendations: nothing smaller than a 5-gallon container. They're 5-gallon grow bag. There's different terminology about soil or solid, non-liquid measurements for that. So get them on the ground. Now, again, like I talked about, these are a cool weather crop. So once the soil temperature, and some of you are in areas where this will happen, once that soil temperature gets to 85 degrees to 90 degrees, the potato will just die. Regardless of what stage of growth it is in, it will die. So that's the key. If you're in the southern parts of the United States or southern parts of the country you're living in, where it is very warm during the summer months, you may grow these in the winter time in your particular region. So getting them in the ground, getting them in soil that is cool but not too cool is key, and adequate moisture as well.
Right, so you want to keep that in mind, plenty of moisture. And then we also have hilling potatoes, which we've done before.
That's the process of adding the soil around the stalk of the potato as they emerge from the soil.
When it comes to harvesting them, you want to go ahead and you'll see the tops of them die down or die back. And that's when it's time to harvest. So you take a flat tine garden fork or a shovel. A fork is preferred because you have less likely of a chance of cutting the potato. So this way you can use a garden fork. And you go ahead and you get them harvested. And now storing them is pretty simple in itself too. You can store them in a cool, dark place like a root cellar or any place.
Basement.
Basement. But you want to make sure it's cool and dry. Then you can even can them. So you can do things like canned potatoes. You can make a different soups with them and put the potatoes in there. You can also freeze them. So there's lots of different things you can do with them or obviously you can just eat them as well. So a lot of different things to do once you harvest them.
Pressure canning the potato.
Yeah, pressure canning.
So there's some things you need to know about to potatoes here, just like you need to know about tomatoes. Potatoes, there are hundreds of varieties available. It really determines what you are intending the use of that potato to be used for. For example, russet potatoes are known as a baked potato. There's many different other varieties of potatoes out there, and different potatoes grow better in different climates. You have to do your research on this and figure out what you want to use them for. Some are really good for baking, some are good for French fries, some are good for roasting, and the list goes on and on. Early in the season, if you plant them when you feel the soil is adequately warm enough, and then they do emerge, the tops emerge, and you get a frost, it does kill back the top growth. It will not kill the potato, but it will cause the potato to go into a recovery mode to where it's going to spend more energy to reestablish that top growth in order to photosynthesize to be able to produce tubers at the appropriate time. Based on the variety of potatoes that you purchase, they can take between 50 and 135 days to reach maturity. You will know when they reach maturity based on the flowering, and then after the flowers, the plant begins to die off, as Holly spoke about. You can harvest them at any given time after those flowers bloom, but the longer you let them, when those plants die back, then you know that the tubers are at their maximum size that they're going to get. So that's something to keep in mind when planting potatoes, is all of that, and there's so much more to learn about potatoes. And you can do this in grow bags, in containers, raised beds, traditional ground garden. They're a very versatile plant. We've even seen people grow them in compost piles. Well, it didn't intentionally, but they grew in compost piles because you threw the compost out. So potatoes can be grown in many, many different fashions. There's many different varieties available to grow potatoes, but they are a cool weather crop. And based on what portion of the country you are in, another trick that you could possibly practice is get them in real early. If you have a very short variety, a 60 or 70-day variety, get them very early in the spring, and then get another crop in later off into the later portions of summer, but right before that frost happens, that it doesn't kill back the green growth. So you get 2 harvests in the year. We could probably practice that, but it's better for us to put them all in at one time and then harvest them as the different varieties reach maturity.
Coming up next, we'll talk with Shawn Studer of Body, Mind, and Soil about healthy water.
Right after this.
Paradigm Garden, Wisconsin's largest progressive gardening center. Located in Madison, Wisconsin, Paradigm Gardens offers the largest selections of soil amendments, organic and salt-based plant nutrients, grow lights, and hydroponic systems available in the Midwest. Our knowledgeable and experienced sales staff are always available to help. Visit our new website, www.paradigmgardens.com, or visit our retail store at 4501 Helgeson Drive, Madison, Wisconsin, just off Stoughton Road.
It's all about the soil at ManureT.com. With their grass-fed, antibiotic, and growth hormone-free cattle and horses, owner Annie Haven puts the quality in her premium soil conditioner. 100% organic and natural, whether feeding your flowers or veggies, indoors or out, you can grow organically with confidence. To purchase authentic Haven brand Manure Tea, small orders or large, go to ManureT.com. Always free shipping.
Hello, this is Shawn James Cameron from the Horticultural Channel based in London, England, giving you practical gardening advice for the amateur gardener. Check us out at thehortchannel.tv. But right now we're going to join Joey and Holly Baird on the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Podcast.
Welcome everybody back to the program. If you want to check out, we encourage you to check out the sponsors you've just heard and our entire sponsor lineup. You can find that on our website, thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com. Click on the podcast tab at the top of the page. Support them because they support us in the same beliefs of gardening as we have, that you should be able to grow wherever you want to for free. Hey, let's go over to California to talk about healthy water and using water wisely. California is in an extreme drought right now, and we have to be wise with the water that we use. Let's go talk to the founder of the Body, Mind, and Soil Hose in Water Filter System. He is also an author. We're going to talk about all of that and his book that you can get. Welcome to the program, Shawn Studer. Welcome, Shawn.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us on the program. As I spoke about, California is in a historic drought, and that may be self-induced by the state of California or natural. Whatever the case may be, we need to be able to use water wisely. And you've seen this. You call them cut, blow, and go people in California, landscapers.
Yeah, mow, blow, and go.
Talk about some of the ways that a normal individual living in California or New York or wherever they're at in the world, how they can better utilize the water they have available by using less but getting more of an effect out of it.
Well, it always comes back to it's all about the soil. And what these mow, blow, and go guys do that is so destructive is they will cut the grass too short. They rake out all the leaves out from underneath the bushes and trees, and those leaves are a natural way of mulching the soil and protecting that soil from drying out, as well as feeding the soil biology. And so when you remove those leaves, the soil dries out because it has direct sunlight on it, and it becomes more compact. So now when you do water, the water just runs off instead of soaking in. So a very simple solution is just to mulch the bare ground, leave the leaves there when they do fall, and because that's going to help protect that soil and keeps it moist. And it stimulates the soil biology by feeding it and protecting it from that direct sunlight. So it's a simple thing, really, but most people aren't aware how valuable using mulch is and keeping the bare ground mulched.
Okay, now when we talk about mulch, do you talk about any sort of natural mulch? You obviously said the leaves, but is there something that's better than others?
Oh, weed suppressant is just an added benefit. The real reason that you look at Mother Nature and why you think about the leaves that when they fall down from trees. Well, first of all, most trees have very deep root systems, and they're like miners. They mine the minerals that are deeper in the ground that the surface level plants can't get to. And so they'll bring those minerals up through the trunk out to the leaves, and then they drop back to the surface of the plant. That's also a nutrient cycle that feeds the tree itself. So when you're removing all those leaves with a valuable nutrients in them, it stops the nutrient cycle. And those leaves also, like I said, protect the soil. But any kind of mulch is, mostly the shredded wood. You definitely want to stay away from, when using mulch around your landscape, I wouldn't use any bark, because bark is on the tree to repel water from the trunk. So it's repelling water in the landscape too. And it doesn't break down easily, and it attracts termites. So it's better to use shredded native trees, and never ever use that rubber mulch. That stuff is horrible.
That was what I was going to bring up. If you're going to buy mulch at the store, you want to read what the ingredients or the contents of that bag are, because the suppliers like to sneak stuff in, not thinking the consumer is going to pay attention.
Right. And the colored wood chips are colored with toxic chemicals. So just use the natural wood, chips that have been. But it's better if you can go to lands. Sometimes the landfills will have mulch that you can get for low cost too. So you can check with the city to see if they're mulching any of the landscape material.
Now, you talk about water retention by using mulch. Obviously, if you've built the soil correctly, we all have different types of soil on our property, no matter where we live. Yeah, right. With the proper type of soil, naturally, that can help retain the moisture that's dropped on your property as well.
Right, absolutely. But again, following Mother Nature, do you ever see bare soil in Mother Nature's, except, of course, the desert? So you think about even Mother Nature, it's either the grass is growing in real thick, so shading this, or you have a forest area where you have, the leaves and dead animals and plants that have covered the soil. So it's still not exposed to sunlight. Either it's shaded naturally, or it's covered with leafy material, dead plant and animal material.
So let's talk about how not to kill the soil, the beneficial organisms in your soil. If you're not using well water, rainwater, let's talk about all the bad stuff that's in city water that we drink, that's also going into our soil, and the stuff that the government says is okay.
Yeah. As far as it's the city water is bad enough anyway. It's getting worse. But the thing is, you just want to protect that soil biology more than anything, and feed that, because that's what's really, as long as that's active, that's going to help the soil to remain loose so water can soak in, and the earthworms are there to aerate the soil too. So, but using the mulch and having, try to have as good water as you can too helps.
Now, you're the co-founder, co-creator of a hose-in water filter. It's called the Filter of Eden, or the Body, Mind, and Soil hose-in filter. We're going to talk about the benefits of this filter and how it's superior over other commercial filters that are on the market. But what led you to create this when there were so many other filters on the market that you could just gone to a big box store and purchased?
Well, first of all, I didn't know there was any other filters on the market, because I haven't really thought about filtering the water. And what led me to come up with this was I was making some compost tea, and it was just a real hassle to try to dechlorinate the water. And we were visiting a local water manufacturer talking about home systems, and I just asked the guy, I said, hey, can you make me a hose-in filter that takes out the chlorine? He said, yeah, sure. He was an engineer. And that was on a Friday, and Monday he had a prototype. And I didn't know there was any others on the market for actually a few months after that. And then I finally decided I better see what my competition is. And what I saw was, there's not much competition when you look at quality. Even though we have the most expensive, we have the best value, because the other ones just aren't going to last. They have plastic hose-in fittings. Some of them are, quite a few of them are actually disposable. Once they're used up, you just throw them away. They don't even have a refillable media. So we use grass hose-in fittings. We have a superior grade plastic housing, and it's refillable. So we built this thing to last.
Yeah, we can attest to that. That you have a very durable filter. Mm-hmm. You don't have to worry about over tightening on the hose because you don't have to worry about cracking that plastic fitting like you were speaking about. And on yours, you have one of the longer lives of life the filter has at 25,000 gallons before you need to replace that filter inside of it.
So it is the best value on the market, because if you were to buy one of our competitors that isn't going to last, when the plastic hose and fittings break, then you have to go buy another one. You've already spent more money than if you just bought one of ours.
Right, and people are thinking, well, how much is 25,000 gallons? Well, I've broke this down for our listeners. 25,000 gallons is approximately 8,000 minutes. That's approximately 133 and a third hours, which roughly, if you water 1 hour a week, and I know not all of us do that, 1 hour a week for 26 weeks, which is a half a year, you can get about 5 years out of this water filter before you have to even think about replacing the filter portion internally.
Right.
And that's an incredible value, knowing that, you pay a little up front, but knowing you're putting healthy water in your garden, in your dog dish, or for whatever other activity you have your family participating in.
Right. Small livestock. It's great for watering small livestock or even horses. We have some customers that use it for their horses.
Absolutely.
So, there's got a lot of good uses to it. But the biggest thing is, the biggest danger to the water to the soil biology, the microbes, is chlorine, because we put chlorine in the water to kill bacteria. Well, we have that good bacteria in the soil we want to not only protect, but feed and stimulate. And so that's what this does.
And if our listeners are wanting to know where they can find it, they can come to our website, thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com, click on the body, mind, and soil icon that's on the right-hand side of the page. You can buy it and you can get free shipping, and that's a deal that we've worked out with you, Shawn, for our listeners. Videos and podcasts to help those you listeners, to get healthy water on your property, in your animals, and in your soil.
Right.
So you have a new book, which is Organic Vegetable Gardening 101, How to Turn Brown Thumbs Green. What was the driving force behind writing your book?
I think it was just I had all this information anyway, and I forgot what the catalyst was for me writing it. I think it was, actually what it was, more of a lead generation. Like, well, I need to offer this on my website for lead capture, and I'm not even offering on the website anymore. But it's you can get it through other sources. But for a while there, I was offering it for free. But it's just a lot of good information I wrote it from the perspective of somebody that doesn't know about vegetable garden, how to get started and what to do. And because that's the biggest probably impediment, it would be somebody that's intimidating if you don't know even how to get started. And so I wrote it from that perspective. So whether you're doing raised beds or even pots, growing in pots, I just kind of did a step-by-step. You just follow this and you're going to be fine.
Wonderful. A lot of good information. Again, give us your website for those who want to journey over there and see all the other products you have available, and they can get free shipping through our website. But what's the website that they can go to find your other projects and products?
It's bodymindandsoil.com.
Shawn, greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us, share some information about how unhealthy the water that we thought once was healthy to drink in the city, and we'll be sure to continue to work on helping educate people on that water.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and we'll be right back after this.
A gardener knows that the key to a good plant is its roots. With poor roots, the end result is not good. Conventional pots and trays cause roots to wrap around and become root-bound. Then you try to unwrap the roots at the time of planting, hoping not to break them. But never again with the Root Maker, a non-chemical innovation that naturally air prunes roots to create more vigorous roots. Never a root-bound plant again. Whether trees, flowers, or edibles, home garden or commercial grower, more roots means healthier, more productive plants. To get your own, visit rootmaker.com.
Oh, yeah. What you say? You say Nasala Kombucha. It'll put some glide in your stride and some pep in your step. Nasala Kombucha. Yeah.
Nasala Kombucha makes your body
It's Joey
and Holly Baird
of the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Podcast, taking a moment to remind you that you can sign up for a weekly email so you don't miss anything that we do, our podcasts, our videos, our digital quarterly magazine. You won't miss anything by signing up.
Just go onto our website on the right-hand side. There's a big button for you to press. Just go ahead and sign up for our emails.
And you can also ask us questions. Underneath that big green button, there's a big red button. So sign up for our emails for free, no spam, and if you've got a question, you can send us that as well. WisconsinVegetableGardener.com for the health-conscious organic gardener worldwide.
Hey, Scott Poirier here with GottaGrowIt.com, and I gotta tell you, I'm like nuts over anything you can grow out of the soil and eat. I'm all about growing food successfully. Currently, you're listening to Joey and Holly Baird on the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardening Podcast.
And that's why we're doing a little bit different method here, so kind of act like nature in our garden.
Covering the soil up. Welcome back to the program, everybody. If you want to know more about the sponsors you have just heard and our entire sponsor lineup, check them out at the website, thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com, and click on the podcast tab at the top of the page. Support them because they support us in the same gardening beliefs. Those links are also in the show notes for this episode. We're not done yet. We've got 2 more topics to cover. First is Gardening in 2 Minutes. Gardening in 2 Minutes is an audio production that Holly and I produce on a weekly basis for a number of podcasts and a few radio programs. If you want to have Gardening in 2 Minutes on your particular program, you can contact us through the website.
This Gardening in 2 Minutes is about lessons we've learned in the garden, which happened to us last year, that hopefully you can apply to your garden this year.
This Gardening in 2 Minutes is sponsored by SueCompost.com, distributing black gold certified leaf compost in the upper Midwest portions of the United States. If you are somewhere that wants to obtain Sue certified leaf compost, you can contact them at SueCompost.com and they will help you out. And here is Gardening in 2 Minutes. This is Gardening in 2 Minutes. Each year we garden, we learn new techniques and tricks about our garden. Things that we may read in a book or we learn on our own, whether it purposely or accidentally. This year we've learned a number of different things that will help us in the future. We're just going to mention a few.
I've learned that you can do many things with Jerusalem artichokes, also known as sunchokes. Sunchokes are a perennial vegetable. It's a root vegetable, and they are different, kind of unique. And I've learned that you can roast them. You can turn them into basically hash browns, and you can even put them and lacto-ferment them for a nutritious side dish. You can even mash them like mashed potatoes.
One thing I've learned is people like to weed their garden, but sometimes we get carried away. You may not necessarily have to weed your garden. Weeds can actually help your vegetables grow. I'll explain. Yes, and weeds take nutrients out of the soil, which your vegetables that you have planted with the intentions of eating them will take. But weeds can also be a buffer zone for those vegetables. You plant your vegetables, you allow the weeds to naturally come up and go through their normal growth cycle. So when the bad bugs in your area come to attack your garden, the weeds have surrounded the vegetables and the actual bad bugs begin to attack those weeds and leave your vegetables alone. Then in essence, you can save those seeds of those vegetables because they were the strongest strain in growing with the weeds and working together. So you have vegetables and you may have weeds, but you don't have the bugs eating your vegetables. But this is something that you have to decide on a garden-to-garden basis. For more tips and ideas and tricks that we've learned throughout the year, our weekly video productions, as well as our free downloadable digital quarterly magazine, you can find all that information at
thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.
For the health-conscious organic gardener worldwide. For Gardening in 2 Minutes, I'm Joey Baird.
And I'm Holly Baird.
So we want to cover one more topic before we get out of here today, and that is square foot gardening. Square foot gardening is a method that was developed by an individual named Mel Bartholomew about 30-ish years ago. The practice of square foot gardening is pretty much what it sounds like. You're gardening in square feet.
Now this method is done to help save space. A lot of people follow this method if they have a smaller, if they have a raised bed or a small area to plant. It is a good method for that.
Essentially, it's each square foot is its own designated grow space. For example, you can have most of the references are off of a raised bed, 4x4 foot raised bed, which will give you 16 square feet of growing space. It's gridded off in strings or little markers. It looks like a giant, oversized checkerboard. And, for example, you would have radishes growing in 1 square foot. You can get 16 radishes in 1 square foot. Each square foot is identified by the number of vegetables or a number of seeds you can plant. 16 radishes in 1 square foot. Once those radishes get harvested, you can take that square foot and utilize it for putting green beans in it. You can get 9 green beans in 1 square foot, 16 carrots in 1 square foot, 9 beets in 1 square foot, etc., etc. 1 tomato plant, 1 eggplant, 1 pepper plant per square foot. It's a great method whether you have a raised bed or in the instance that we have in the large garden where we have distinct grow areas and permanent walk paths where we can also utilize this method of planting to break up a 40 square foot raised bed, for instance.
You also want to keep in mind that one disadvantage in growing in the raised square foot gardening method is if you want to grow viney crops like squash, watermelon, cucumbers, things like that. Now, if you are growing viney crops that produce a smaller fruit like a cucumber or a smaller squash, you can certainly go ahead and attach a trellis in the area to grow that, so it grows up. However, if you have something like watermelon or pumpkins, you cannot necessarily trellis those. They're too heavy, and once they get too large, then they're going to be too heavy for the trellis. So you want to keep that in mind that if you want to grow something really viney, it may not be the best method, but as far as keeping track of your space and making good utilization of your space, then the square foot gardening method is a good idea.
Now you could take those very large viney crops and assign them to an outer edge square foot, and then have them vine off the bed and out into your yard or other area. But again, it's not going to be contained. You're going to have vines going everywhere, so that's something to keep in mind. Now, it's a great method, and the main the mix that Mel has developed is, I believe it's 1/3 peat moss, 1/3 vermiculite or perlite, and 1/3 compost. You mix this all up and put in your raised bed, and that eliminates the compaction factor. Regular compost will work well. And again, doing this in just a 4x4 square foot area that you've turned over in your yard will also be very effective in this method of gardening. So we practice the square foot gardening in some instances in our raised berms, as I spoke about, and just in regular gardening in general. But it gives you an idea of how to maximize the amount of space that you have available for growing different crops that you enjoy eating. So if you've never gardened, or if you're trying to figure out different methods of gardening, square foot gardening may be one of those methods that you may want to consider looking into. There's a lot of great resources online. And now, not all of the recommendations that I have found work or would be as productive as maybe just going a regular row. For example, we're looking at how many parsnips to put in 1 square foot, or what it would be recommended. One source said 16. You're going to have very small parsnips if you're trying to grow 16 in 1 square foot. Other sources said 9. I would recommend 6 on that, because if you want your parsnips to be big, you're going to need space for those roots to develop. That's just my personal opinion, and I've been wrong before, but I think that some of the numbers are based on if you want very small vegetables to grow in. Well, that does it for this show. We hope that you have enjoyed the program. If you have any questions in regards to what we have covered today, you can find us on our website. There's a big red button that says questions. Go ahead and shoot us off a question. We'll get your answer back in a very respectable amount of time. And until next time, keep in mind that the audio that you have heard, the music that you have heard, is courtesy of freesfx.co.uk and audioneutronics.com. We use those sources. Those are copyright-free and royalty-free sources to help liven up the podcasts.
This is with the exception of Nacella and Paradigm Gardens, they provide their own music.
So until next time, I'm Joy Baird.
And I'm Holly Baird.
And we will see you in the garden. The Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Podcast is a production of the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com for the health-conscious organic gardener worldwide, and distributed in association with WI Garden Media.